name's Chris Quinlan. Welcome to the Drum Show. I'm launching in to a film soundtrack for no film called Think Hard, Play Slow. But I didn't play slow. I'm sorry about that. I lied. What I'm talking about tonight is film music, okay? What I often say to my students is that you're not always required to play don't always have to, be in a rock beat or a jazz beat or anything like that. Sometimes you're playing for the school band and they're doing the theme for The Lion King or something like that, and you have to play more in an orchestral context. So you're creating a mood rather than a beat sometimes. Now, to play in a mood, whether it be a bad mood or a good mood, sometimes, and I've been doing this a little bit over the last series of episodes, is where sometimes you have to play slow notes fast. You can see that this is a double stroke roll. Right, right, left, left, right, right, left, left. But the idea is, imagine if you're doing some kind of soundtrack to a thriller. Things like that. You need to create mood, okay? So that's what goes on. So what I'd like to do tonight is talk about film scoring, some of the things you have to do, okay? So let me get straight into it. Of course, one of the things you do to create mood, is sounds create, close your eyes, and if I was to do... I'm sort of hoping that thinking that you're in China somewhere or something like that. If I use different kinds of cymbals and sort of do something like I'm sort of hoping you're thinking that you're in the set of 2001: A Space Odyssey, like in space. No one can hear you drum. Something like that anyway. And what goes on is it creates mood. Now, let's talk about the different aspects of film scoring. The first thing that you really have is that with the music that you are trying to create, with these sounds, sort of thing, you are creating subtext. And what subtext is when you are creating a theme for the hero of the film. So if we're going to do something completely stupid, let's do Dudley Do-Right of the Mounties, right? Very proud, very proud. That kind of thing, all very upright and all that. I know it's silly, but I'm doing sort of very plain examples, to get my point across here tonight. And then, of course, you've got the lovely heroine, Sweet Felicity or someone like that. And she might be represented by... How silly. Something like that, you see. And then, of course, you have the villain, okay. Snidely Whiplash. Ha ha ha! Oh no, that's more roly-poly, isn't it? So. Probably the most famous music for villainous characters is this, if I can play it on the drums. is coming. Okay, that's Jaws, the very famous score written by film composer John Williams for Steven Spielberg's film Jaws, which is a modern day classic, I suppose. So what happens is that's obviously the theme of the villain, okay? And then of course there's the doodly-dee, doodly-dee, something's happening, montage, all this sort of business. So you have to write for that. And as a drummer, as a musician, you also have to play for that as well. So that's what goes on. Now, when we're creating things like this, what starts to happen with music is that you'll have Dudley Do-Right's theme, right? The hero's theme. Then you'll have the lovely heroine, the damsel in distress kind of theme. They're very, very nice. Of course I'm doing simple ideas here. And then of course you have the evil character's theme, that kind of thing. Now, when you're actually doing things like this, the composer will juxtapose the, different themes. What that means is overlay them. Now, on purely drumming terms, that starts to bring in things like polymeters that I've talked about, getting a little bit technical, because the main theme for the hero might be, say, a march theme in 6/8. Something like that, anyway. The heroine's theme might be in 3/4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Playing amongst the daisies. This is sick. Okay. Note to self, Chris. And then, of course, Snidely Whiplash's character, the evil dude, is probably a very straightforward 4/4. Now, what can start to happen? You start bringing the themes in. So if I'm making the toms evil and the snare drum the hero, from Snidely Whiplash. Do you see what's going on here? So I'll go to the break with that introduction for film music, okay? So what I've done is I've started with a little intro, being a little bit thrillerish. And then explaining the basic ideas of subtext. Okay. Back in a sec. Okay, back from the break. Let's get a little bit technical now. One of the great themes for, one of the classic things in cinema is the shower scene from Psycho. What happens is the very famous Alfred Hitchcock film, when the murderer comes in, sort of thing, Mr. Bates, sort of thing, terrible moider and all that. What happens with the film score is that Bernard Herrmann, very famous film composer of the 1950s, who used to do a lot of work with Alfred Hitchcock films, he scored it for the screeching violin, so, all that sort of stuff. It's famous. It's very famous. Very scary also, very effective. One of the most effective pieces of cinematic music. Okay, how did he write it? Well, on the face of it, it's very easy because it's just squealing violins at the time when the moida happens, that kind of thing. But what goes on is that that particular scene in composition, music composition, that particular scene, for argument's sake, could be 1 minute and 24 seconds into the scene, okay? How does he write for that so that he gets the music spot on? Back in the 50s, you just had to, sort of hope for the best. Or I shouldn't say it quite like that, it's a little bit more technical than that. But essentially what happens in film scoring is that you take the metronomic beat, and for argument's sake, or just for simplicity, let's talk about 60 beats per minute, okay, because that's 1 second. So if the murder scenes, the violins had to come in at 1 minute and 24 seconds into the scene, what goes on is the metronome marking, 60 beats per minute. I keep saying Franz Waxman, I'm getting to Franz Waxman. Bernard Herrmann would have written those notes at the 84th beat. You see, 60 beats per minute, 60 seconds is 1 minute, so that's 60, 24 seconds in, 60 plus 24, 84 beats in. So the 84th beat. And then depending on what time signature he was using, all this sort of business, it would be the nth bar, whatever bar it might be, whether it's in 4/4 or 3/4 time, or shifting time signatures depending. So therefore you would play music. Let's say, for argument's sake, I wanted to do that. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. You see? So I'd write that in at so many seconds. When you're in a film studio, a film music studio, the setup will be you'd have the orchestra, okay, and they would be facing the conductor. The conductor is looking at the big screen with the movie, and underneath the movie is the time code. And the time code since the early 1970s is a thing called SMPTE, S-M-P-T-E, and it's a time code put together by the Society of Motion Picture Technical Engineers, SMPTE, okay? And the SMPTE time code is something that got put together to lock the film in with the sound, okay? And what happens is that the conductor will be conducting the score to essentially what is a metronomic beat, okay? The time code shifts sometimes. You might have the metronome going at 100 beats per minute, and then you do the math so that it works out to that 1 minute, 24 seconds and all this sort of stuff. So he would play. There would be certain sections that would be, say, in free time, where what that means is there's rubato. You might hold on a cymbal, and wait for a cue. And then the car chase scene comes in. Whatever it might be. Okay, so there's that. I'm doing silly, typical silly examples to get my message across tonight with film music. So that's what goes on there. There's SMPTE. Of course, that brings in what we call synchronization. Okay, and what you do is you synchronize the music to the particular point when you want a specific part. Okay, so that's what goes on there. Okay, so moving right along with this, you can do the opposite. Okay, you can actually do what's called, I've called it free timing. You can also call it spotting, okay, where you, this is what I'm saying about the particular time when the violins come in just at the time, sort of thing. Just when the door flies open, ta-da, all this sort of business. You can spot it, you can sync it in, you can slide it in. So it's not like in the old days where you had to play and wait and then go, now, and all this. You can actually do it via a computer, which makes it easy. After the break, I'll talk about a few more kinds of ideas that you can do with this kind of business of treating playing music to mood, to suit, and the classic example is your typical film music for things like, Harry Potter, Star Trek, all these sorts of films. Terrific. See you soon. That little bit there, what I tried to do is, of course, something I do with this particular drum kit, is that I split off my hands, you see, because that could be one character's theme. That could be his accomplice, sort of his partner in crime. Because I'm playing lightly with mallets, what I'm doing, I suppose it's a little bit like tiptoeing, okay? So it could be two, lovable villains, sort of thing, tiptoeing across a rooftop or something like that. Bringing in my feet with the bass drum, lower sounds, obviously gives you things like tension, like if I'm doing... dynamics, and away you go. Now, that's what goes on now. To finish off this particular episode, what I'd like to do now is talk about the complete opposite, where film is basically directed and written and, sort of, or scripted for the music, okay? A couple of famous ones. I mentioned 2001, A Space Odyssey, Stanley Kubrick's classic film from the late 60s. He used classical music such as Mozart and Krzysztof Penderecki for the really scary scenes. Penderecki's music, or Penderecki some people say, is very much screeching violins, very avant-garde and very 20th century music sort of thing. His most famous piece is Threnody, which means a lament. Threnody for the victims of Hiroshima. And what it basically is violins represent just the screeching of the, the dropping of the atomic bomb at the end of World War II. But 2001: A Space Odyssey, what Kubrick ended up doing was cutting the film to Mozart and then to these classic pieces of music. Another famous one is a film by Godfrey Reggio in the 80s. Well, he had a trilogy actually, but the most famous was the first one. Is Koyaanisqatsi, which is very much an art house film, and essentially it's, I think Koyaanisqatsi means life in transition, or some such thing, or maybe even life in turmoil, or earth in turmoil, something like that. But essentially what happens is he took the music of Philip Glass, who was one of the minimalists, along with Steve Reich, and very famous composers. But Philip Glass, Godfrey Reggio, the director of the film, essentially cut the film and filmed the film to Philip Glass's music. The music was written first, and then the film was cut to it. Another very famous one, and probably the most famous one, is Ennio Morricone's film score, The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, the bit that goes da-dee-la, wah, 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 and all that. And the actual final scene where our Clint Eastwood, the good, Eli Wallach, the ugly, and Lee Van Cleef, is the bad, did their little showdown in the big graveyard, the music was already written. So Sergio Leone, the very famous Italian film director, essentially cut the scene to Ennio Morricone's score. sort of thing. And I can bring it now down to things like good old Metallica, because their walk-on music to their concerts for such a long time is a piece of music by Morricone called The Ecstasy of Gold. And that's the part where the Eli Wallach character is running around the graveyard trying to find where the gold is buried and all that. And that's very famous as well, and I believe that the music was written previously for that as well, and the film was cut to the timing of the music. So that's the other way around there. So I better sort of close off for tonight. I like this kind of music so much. Everybody listens to it. All you need to do is get out a DVD, something probably that you've watched before, a favourite Harry Potter or a favourite Star Trek or a favourite something or other, and watch it again, but with the television turned off. So you're just listening to the audio. And all of a sudden, your ears will light up because you're not seeing the visuals. You'll actually hear things like something like that. And it'll be stuff, that's why sometimes it's called subtext, because it's like the same kind of thing as subliminal. You don't perceive it immediately, you just feel it, or it gives you a sense of foreboding, or a sense of something's coming, or the car chase is happening, or whatever. So that's just something about film music, and it gets you thinking, because this is a drum show, it gets you thinking about our instrument, the drums, in a slightly different way than, let's just say, Van Halen-esque. Okay, so you've got that kind of thing. Anyway, I'll close off for now. My name is Chris Quinlan. I hope you enjoyed what I'm going on about here. Might do a little sequel to this because I do like this kind of stuff, and there's a lot to it. If you want to contact me, drumshow@hotmail.com. The website is thedrumshow.net. If you'd like me to come to your school, tell your music coordinator, tell him to give me a call, and that'd be terrific. Happy to give lessons, happy to sell books, teach you the right way. Anything. Help. Okay, I'll see you next week. Okay, take care. Bye.